Okay, and we are now recording this week's webinar. It's the final webinar of 2018. You can see the blue link here, extension.umd.edu/women in ag. You'll be able to view this webinar and previous ones at that link, as well as check out our 2019. So we have a webinar the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. We also have the upcoming Annie's Project classes. We have 2 of those that are happening here in the Mid-Atlantic, as well as the Mid-Atlantic Women in Ag Conference, which is scheduled for February 13th. So just very excited about all the Women in Ag programs coming up through the winter session and then into 2019. Again, we are recording. If you have any questions, there's a chat pod. You can ask those questions of Sarah. She's going to be our presenter today, Sarah Everhart, talking about using an LLC to strengthen your farm operation. And as I'm passing the ball to her so she can pull up her PowerPoint, I'd like to thank our sponsors of this program, as well as we have a number of collaborators that we work with across the Mid-Atlantic states. So thanks so much for them. So Sarah, I'm now sharing with you, and yep, we're starting to see your PowerPoint. Excellent. So again, any questions from the participants, please use the chat pod. You should be seeing Sarah's presentation now. Sarah?
Thanks, Shannon. Let me just make this a little bit smaller, if I can see. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me during this busy holiday season. So we're going to talk about using an LLC to strengthen your farm operation. And as Shannon said, let me just make sure I can progress through my slides here. I work for the Agricultural Law Education Initiative, and that means I'm an attorney that works for the University of Maryland. My job is to provide legal education and outreach to farmers across Maryland. I work with my colleagues at the University of Maryland College Park and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I actually work for the University of Maryland School of Law, and we are a program of empowering the state. Our website is umaglaw.org, so if you've never checked out our resources, I encourage you to do so. We have a variety of different publications to explain all different sorts of agricultural law topics in an easy to understand way. Just a disclaimer, I am presenting legal education here today, not legal advice. So I will encourage you, I always encourage folks to seek individual legal advice on this topic in particular. LLCs are something that is really a customized type of animal, as we'll talk about today. So just giving you a general overview today for educational purposes, always a good idea to seek your own individual legal advice. All right, so let's start with what is an LLC, since it's an acronym, and sometimes I think folks get a little bit confused when we start using acronyms and talking about business entities. So an LLC is a limited liability company, and it's a business entity. Sometimes they're referred to as a business organization, similar to a partnership or a corporation. There's many different types of business entities out there. An LLC can really do anything a person can do. So it can buy, own, or sell property or assets. It can rent farmland. It can employ workers. So an entity is really just sort of a substitute for a human being. I'm just going to be talking about LLCs today because there's plenty of things to talk about on that subject. However, we have some really good resources on our website which sort of walk you through and explain the various types of business organizations that are out there and how they can be utilized in the farm context. So if you want to learn more, you can check out this publication that I have a picture of here. We also walk through each type of, or many different types of business entities in video format. So if you're tired of reading and you'd rather click on some videos, you can find all that information on our website, umaglaw.org. All right, so what are the advantages of an LLC? LLCs are very popular, and the reason for that is because they're more flexible than a typical corporation. So you can have contributions in any form. There's no limit to the number of members that you can have. And so the folks who own an interest in an LLC are called members, as opposed to in a corporation, they're referred to as shareholders. So you'll hear me use the word members today, but it's really sort of the equivalent of a shareholder in a corporation. Who can be a part of an LLC? Really anybody. So individuals, entities, trusts, corporations, they can all be members. So if your farm already has a trust or a partnership or a corporation, you can have those entities and individuals all join together and be members of an LLC. A reason that a lot of folks are interested in forming an LLC, the reasons will vary, and we'll go through some of those reasons today, but one of the big benefits is that members of an LLC have personal liability protection. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. And another advantage is that an LLC provides a framework for a business to grow and transition to the next generation. So this is a big advantage in the farm context when you're dealing with families, multiple owners of a business. It can really give you a good sort of starting off point where you could have some liability protection and then also have a framework to bring in owners in the future if you think the next generation is going to be interested in joining in the farm operation, and or allows senior members to relinquish control and ownership over time and slowly transition in the next generation. Disadvantages of an LLC. Frankly, there's not that many disadvantages. I use the word disadvantages, but really, for any business entity, you're going to need legal assistance to form a fully viable LLC. So it's a disadvantage of an LLC, and really it's a disadvantage that all business entities, well, most, I mean, sometimes, people can form a partnership technically without seeking legal assistance if it's just two folks going into business together, but it's not going to be a very well-organized business entity if it doesn't have a partnership agreement. You're going to need legal assistance for that. But for an LLC, you're definitely going to need to seek some legal assistance. You can do a little bit of homework on your own because the first thing you're going to need to do is to choose a name. And you can use this link here to go through the state of Maryland and make sure that the name's not already in use. So that's something that you can get settled before you go see that attorney, and that would be a good thing for you to do. And you can also take a look at the forms that you're going to need to fill out. Fairly simple fill-in-the-blank type forms for the articles of organization. You're going to need to designate a resident agent, and a resident agent is the person in the LLC who is going to be responsible for filing the annual paperwork. If your LLC was involved in some type of litigation and was served, that would be the person that would need to be served. So the resident agent should really be a person. Sometimes people choose a resident agent that isn't a part of the LLC. Sometimes they'll choose their attorney, and that's perfectly fine. If you have somebody in your business who's good at the paperwork, who's good at, opening the mail, and you're going to want that person. The organized paperwork type person, it would be the best pick for a resident agent. And if you don't have that person, you can always ask your attorney if they'd be willing to serve in that capacity, and they're accustomed to doing that. So the articles of organization are going to be a document that's going to be publicly available. So you can go on the State Department of Assessments and Taxation website and search existing LLCs and pull up other folks' articles of organization. You can look at it because it really doesn't have any type of information that would be confidential on it. You can do this, and this is where some folks get tripped up with creating an LLC. So the State Department of Assessments and Taxation has, we call it SDAT, another acronym, sorry, but they have made this very easy for folks to do, and it's inexpensive. And now, with the internet, you can do it relatively quickly. Unfortunately, this confuses some folks because they think that this is the end of creating their LLC, because you can go on, you can fill out these forms easily, pay the fee, and technically your LLC is registered with the state. However, it's definitely not your last step and shouldn't be your last step, because the most important part about an LLC is the operating agreement. The operating agreement is not a public document. That's your private internal playbook for how the LLC is going to function. So that's really going to give you all these sort of agreed upon rules and guidance for how your LLC is going to operate. This needs to be drafted by an experienced attorney, and it really needs to be drafted with the purpose of the LLC in mind. So because LLCs are very flexible, that's a good thing, but it also means that you need to spell out how you want that LLC to operate and, sort of what specifically you want it to do, and we'll go through some of that. But all of that detail needs to be in your operating agreement, and if it's not in your operating agreement, your LLC is not going to be able to function the way you want it to function. It's a living document, so it's normal for it to change over time. However, it's an important first step, and it shouldn't be discounted. And I've experienced folks who try to do the internet articles of organization filing on their own and then think that they can function without a good operating agreement, and it's not a very good idea. And oftentimes the bank's not going to give you a bank account for your LLC unless you have an operating agreement. So don't skip this step. It's very important. All right, so some of the questions that you're going to need to answer in your operating agreement are, what is the purpose of the LLC? So are you doing this for your farm operation just for the general management of the farm and liability protection, or is the intention farm transition, or is it both? How are you going to allow family members to buy a membership interest in the LLC, if that's your intention for forming it, and how are you going to value those interests? For example, are you going to allow folks to earn membership interests through sweat equity? This is something that can be done, and we all have heard stories of conflicts with families and farms when, a lot of times there's folks who are working day to day on the farm who are under the impression that they're going to get an ownership interest or think they should have an ownership interest based on their work on the farm. And this is something, if that's something that you want to have happen on your operation, that's something that you can put in your operating agreement and allow for that sweat equity interest to accumulate. Will family members have a voting interest equal to their membership interest? So it doesn't have to be that way, but if that's the way you want it, you can set it up that way. What farming decisions require a vote? So, maybe you want to set up an LLC for some liability protection, but maybe there's a management structure that's going on currently on the farm and working, and you don't want to disrupt that by having an LLC. You don't want to have all decisions on the farm have to be put to a family vote. That could create more conflicts than it could reduce, so that's the opposite of what you want to happen. So thinking about which decisions on the farm are going to require a vote. You are going to need to establish some corporate formalities, much less than with a typical corporation, but LLCs, they typically have meetings, there's some voting requirements and things like that, and again, you can set that up to reflect your situation. So if you're going to have members of the LLC that are in different states, you're not going to want to have a monthly in-person meeting. That's probably not practical for your situation. So maybe you want to have a quarterly meeting and, and do it with a conference call or something like that, and that's perfectly fine, but you're going to put all that in your operating agreement. Restrictions on voluntary or involuntary transfers of membership shares. So do you want your LLC, is the purpose of it to try to keep the membership interests of the farm and the family? If so, you can put that in there. Do you want a percentage of the membership to approve a transfer? So, if you don't want a member to be able to transfer their interest freely, then you can put that restriction in there. how is a member going to disassociate or withdraw? So it's an important point to think about how someone's going to get out of the LLC. What will happen in the event of a member's divorce? And how will you handle a dispute? Really important, and it's basically, some preventative maintenance that you can put into that operating agreement to try to prevent future conflicts down the road. So getting back to dissolution for a minute, members can plan ahead for the events which can dissolve or terminate the LLC. So some folks choose to have an LLC dissolved upon bankruptcy, retirement, death, resignation, or expulsion of a member. And if all else fails, you can get a court order to dissolve an LLC. And why is all this important? It's important because a lot of folks are operating farms as sole proprietorships or as a general partnership. And the disadvantage to that is that if you have a general partnership, typically upon the death of one of the partners, you're going to need to do a division of assets, and that can mean a sale of the farm, of land or equipment, and it can be very disruptive. So by putting details in a farm operation LLC, you can prevent some of those disruptive type events that can really hamper a farm's ability to go forward, and put in some contingencies for how and when an LLC is dissolved. It doesn't have to be dissolved upon death or resignation. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So taxation of an LLC is important. So you're going to need to decide how you want the LLC to be taxed at the federal level, and how you choose the LLC to be taxed at the federal level is how it's going to be taxed on the state level. Typically, LLCs are taxed like a partnership, so that means the profits and the losses flow through or are passed on to the members, and then they pay the taxes individually. However, you can choose to have an LLC taxed as a corporation. This is a decision that's going to vary person by person and, farm by farm. And so you're really going to need to seek some tax advice from your accountant. So that's another professional that's going to need a call in terms of your LLC. It's an important thing how you want it to be taxed, and it's just going to depend on your goals and everyone's individual situation. There is some required reporting. You do need to file an annual report with the state of Maryland and a personal property tax return. There's a filing fee. However, that filing fee is reduced for a certified family farm. So typically it's $300, and I believe it goes down to $100 if you're a certified family farm. To figure out if your LLC qualifies as a certified family farm, I provided a link there for you. You can check out, that is a blog post that the Agricultural Law Education Initiative posted on the Maryland Risk Management Education blog on that topic. All right, so another mistake that some folks make with an LLC is that they decide to form an LLC and they go through the necessary steps, but then they don't take the extra step of retitling assets. So once you form the LLC, it's not going to own any property, it's not going to have any assets unless you retitle assets in the name of the LLC or the LLC purchases things. So you'd be surprised how often folks make this mistake, and I know it's just because everybody gets busy and this stuff isn't a whole lot of fun. But you need to take the step of filing that deed if you're transferring land into the LLC, changing titles to equipment and that type of thing so that the LLC owns what you want it to own so it can accomplish the goals that you are setting out to accomplish. Consider what assets you want the LLC to own. So if the point of the LLC is to provide liability protection and you're concerned about let's say that you own the farm, the land, and the equipment. It's owned as a sole proprietorship, meaning it's just in a person's name, and you're afraid, if someone comes onto the farm and gets hurt, or if for some reason the owner is sued, all of those things are at risk. So you want to move some things into the LLC. Think about what you want that LLC to own. It's going to be an ongoing process. So at first, the LLC might not own that much, and it can change over time. If the LLC is sued, those assets are going to be vulnerable to a judgment. So let's say you're starting an agritourism operation on the farm, and you want the agritourism operation to operate as an LLC, and you don't want, the house that's on the farm or maybe some other assets to be potentially subject to a judgment if someone were to get hurt on the agritourism operation. So you probably want to put not all that much assets in the LLC's name if that's the point of that. That's something that you can get some legal advice on, but it's just an important thing to remember as time goes on. Every time you acquire something else, think about, should this be in my personal name or should I be buying this through the LLC? So when we're talking about limiting liability, forming an LLC cannot prevent you from being sued. This is America, and it's a very litigious time right now, and so nothing can really prevent you from being sued. So it's important to keep in mind it's really a reduction in it's a reduction in personal liability. So it reduces a member's personal liability for an LLC's workers' acts or LLC debt. So a member is going to still be personally liable for any LLC debts which he personally guarantees or she personally guarantees, and for his or her own personal acts or omissions. So a lot of times, if you attempt to, in some instances, if you attempt to buy equipment or something of higher value, and you want to buy it with the LLC, sometimes you'll find the person who's selling it to you will say, I need a personal guarantee for this. They don't, especially if the LLC doesn't have a lot of assets, they're going to want you to also sign a personal guarantee. So if you sign a personal guarantee, even though the LLC is the person or the entity that's making the purchase, because of that personal guarantee, you're still going to have personal liability for that debt. If you do something wrongful, illegal, fraudulent, you're still going to have personal liability for that. Members have to use the entity to get the protection. And by that I mean, if you're trying to, let's say in the context of our example with the agritourism operation, if you're trying to run an agritourism operation with an LLC because you want to reduce your personal liability, you have to make sure you're using the LLC bank account to run that agritourism operation. You're signing contracts as a member of the LLC, and you're holding that agritourism operation out there as being operated and run by that LLC. Sometimes folks form these entities for a reason, and then they tend to get, because we're used to signing things in our own personal name, and maybe we're used to using our own personal bank account, they get a little sloppy with how they actually do their day-to-day business. So just try to be vigilant about remembering the purpose that you form the LLC for and using it for that purpose, because if you end up in court, that's what's going to be considered. Think about the LLC's reduction of personal liability as a shield. So if you want to be able to use that shield, the judge is going to consider whether you've actually been using the entity for the reason that you set it up, so that you've actually been using it, and that other folks would have been under the impression that the LLC was actually the operator. So if you're having folks sign a waiver for your, let's say there's little carnival rides or, some kind of things at the agritourism operation, you're having kids sign a waiver, or adults sign a waiver on behalf of the kids, rather, you're going to want the name of the LLC on that waiver, not your personal name. All right, so why are LLCs good for farm families in particular? They're good because, as I mentioned, they allow for flexible ownership structures. So that flexibility is particularly helpful in the farm context. You can create different classes of membership. So this can help you in a variety of ways, but it can help you recognize on and off farm family members, which is an issue and a question that we get a lot at the Agricultural Law Education Initiative. I have 2 kids. One of them has stayed on the farm and has worked there for 20 years. One of them has gone off to the big city and doesn't, put time or effort into the farm, but still wants to be a part of the operation, or I still think they should get a share of the profits. How can I do that? How can I recognize these different forms of ownership? And an LLC is a great way to do that. So you can share profits with those off-farm family members, but you can limit their role in decision-making. So you can have a class of membership where there's a membership interest that gets a share of the profits, but they don't get to make decisions on the farm management. The operating agreement can specify a process for resolving family disputes. So we all know families have disputes. Never met a family who didn't. So instead of, just crossing your fingers and hoping that everybody ends up getting along and that the family farm doesn't end up in peril, you can set up a specific process for resolving those things. So you can require mediation. You can have a required percentage of members to agree to a change. So if you have a percentage of the membership interest that has to vote on a certain issue, it's pretty cut and dry, and you'll be able to move forward, and it can really help resolve things and keep things going steady. You can also plan for the things that we all know are going to happen. So we all know in families we have deaths, we have divorces, we have births. So a farmer can describe in the operating agreement who should manage the LLC upon his or her death. Members can agree on how a divorcing spouse would be compensated. So in the event of a divorce, you could agree on a payout amount. And you can create a membership class for future generations that aren't even born yet. So if you want to address children or grandchildren, you can create that membership class in the operating agreement. A lot of folks like LLCs for farm transition because we all know a lot of times the senior folks in the farm are not really so keen on thinking about farm transition. It can be a hard process for folks to let go of that control. And this is a way that you can do it in a real slow and steady way. So it can allow for gradual farm transition. So members can purchase or be gifted interest over a period of time. So you can slowly bring someone into the operation. For the senior folks who are maybe a little stubborn and don't want to give up control, it can be beneficial because they can, slowly be releasing that control. And for the junior folks, it's helpful because they feel as if they're getting closer to that senior management position, and it's being done in a way that they're actually, the progress is acknowledged, but it's being done in a gradual way. So purchases can be done as the buyer is able or based on a set formula or dollar amount each year. Ownership rights can be separated from voting rights. So senior farmers can retain some voting rights and some control over the operation without actually owning a corresponding equal percentage interest in the LLC. So you can do this if you want. You can separate voting rights and control. Gifting is also popular in the LLC context. So senior folks can start gifting minority interests to junior family members or other people on the farm. And this can typically be done at a discounted value. And again, this is something that you're going to want to consult your attorney and your accountant about. However, it can serve a couple different purposes. While you're bringing in those folks into the operation, you're also systematically reducing your taxable estate. So for folks who have a large taxable estate and they have some estate tax concerns, this can be a benefit in that context as well. And like I said, sweat equity can be used to earn membership interests over time, which a lot of folks see as a big benefit. So just to conclude, an LLC can strengthen your operations in a lot of ways. It can limit your personal liability, and this is really important. As you know, farming is unique in that a lot of people live on the operation. So you have your personal home, a lot of your personal assets are wrapped up in your business. That's unlike your typical folks who are, driving to the office every day. So you really need to think about limiting your personal liability and separating your home and any other assets that you wouldn't want to be subject to a business-related lawsuit or debt, separating those out from your business expenses so you can limit your personal liability. You want, in a lot of cases, you want to make it easier to have your business grow over time. And it can be very helpful in transitional planning so you can gift ownership, shares, management control while reducing your taxable estate. I used a couple different sources for this webinar, and they're really good sources of further information. So I give you the links here. One of them was out of Pennsylvania, and another one has some general information and some further detail. So if anyone has any questions after today's webinar, they can contact me at my email or my phone. I'm always happy to take questions on any agricultural law topic or LLCs in particular. So I saw that there was a question, but I can't see the question, so. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it.
Hey, Sarah, can you hear me?
I can.
All right, perfect. So we do have a question about the LLC. In what state is the LLC set up if members are from multiple states? Is there such thing as a primary owner of the LLC or one who is in control of the business?
You can set up your LLC in any state, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter which state your LLC set up in. You're just going to have to follow the state reporting and tax requirements. So if you could have a Maryland LLC and have members from all different states, it doesn't really matter in particular. I would just think you'd want a resident agent within the state that you set up your LLC. What was the second question?
Yeah, is there such a thing as a primary owner of the LLC or one who is in control of the LLC business?
Yeah, it really just, typically there is. So you can choose if you want your LLC to be manager membered, and then you can designate a manager, or whether you want it to be just managed by your members, and then it would be, primarily managed by the person with the majority share of the membership interest. So in a lot of cases, if it's just two folks, whoever has 51% of the membership interest is going to be able to, typically would be the one who'd be in control of that LLC because they have the 51% share. But it is very flexible, so you can set it up either way. You can choose a manager, or you can just choose to have it be based on the percentage of the interest.
Okay. Other questions? Let's see. I'm looking in this chat pod to see. Not seeing any other questions from anyone. Is there, we're ending, the 2018 crop and production year. Is this the best time to kind of start talking about it with family members and getting one set up?
I think it would be a really good time, yeah, especially because, it's going to take a little bit of time. Like I said, you're going to want to consult your legal and your tax professionals. So I think it would be a good time to do some homework and to really think about the reasons it would work for your family, and, call those professionals in January, have a sit down with them, and to get things rolling. And then, if you'd have time, if you started the process in January or February, to do some deeding or change some titles and things like that, and you would think about going into the spring with some reduced liability if that was one of your goals.
Okay. Another question, if members buy into an LLC, how are fees set, or is it done by percent ownership?
Yeah, it's really all customizable. So I know that's not a great answer in a forum like this, but it depends how you set it up. So you can set it up that, you know, you have it at a set price, so that you have it at a set formula, or that you're going to have it valuated and, you know, have an independent appraisal or something like that, a percentage. It's all just going to depend how you set it up in your operating agreement.
So, Sarah, is there examples, if you're talking to someone, are there some examples out there that would help, make some of those decisions of how, I agree, every situation is just so different.
Yeah, I would look at those two resources that I put on the second to last slides there. They link you to some checklists for consideration. And I also, so you can think through some of those things before you sit down with your attorney, but an attorney is going to help you in a lot of ways on this, but lawyers also just are sort of repositories of worst case scenarios, because they've seen LLCs, help folks, and they've seen LLCs that have not worked very well. So I would definitely look through those materials and try to think through some things on your own, but then don't be afraid to ask your lawyers questions about, what's the easiest way we could set this up so that it accomplished my goals. If you have your goals in mind before you talk to your attorney, it's going to help, but your attorney should be able to help you work through some of those. I see a question, can you have an LLC with one member? You definitely can, that you refer to as a single member LLC. It can help limit personal liability. If you have an LLC with only one member, it's going to be assumed that you're going to have that taxed as a partnership. But you definitely can. I've done that before for people. When I was in private practice, I've done that before. So that's possible to have an LLC with only one member.
So another good question, Sarah, is, what happens if members of the LLC aren't abiding by the criteria or expectations? Can the majority owner remove them? Is there legal ways to enforce that LLC?
Yes. So that would be what I was referring to as, some voluntary or involuntary sort of procedure. So yes, you could put that in your operating agreement, that if someone is refusing to attend meetings or, vote on matters, then a lot of times what people will do is that the members will agree that they want the right to buy that membership interest first. And so, yeah, you would put that in there, that you would have the right under certain circumstances to buy that person's membership interest if they want it out, and or how you would basically force someone out if that was necessary. There are, defaults under the law. So in Maryland, there is an LLC law, and that would be the default. So if your operating agreement doesn't speak to something, the members have rights under the law, but basically the LLC law is written that these are the defaults unless it's specified in the operating agreement. So it gives you the benefit and the flexibility to set up your operating agreement in a way that's going to work for your operation. But if you don't do that, then the members do have interest under the law. And if, they were trying to be, if a member needed to defend themselves, they could bring a case based on the rights that they have under the LLC law, which is in the corporations article of the Maryland Code.
Okay. All right. And another question, what is the big difference between an LLC and a trust?
Oh, well, LLCs and trusts are really different animals. I mean, an LLC is, is a business organization that folks buy an interest in. You become a member, or you're gifted an interest, and it can have a variety of different members. It can have different classes of membership. A trust is just a way to own property. So it's not considered a business entity. It's typically an estate planning tool, and you're going to have a trustee who's in charge and can make decisions. They're very, very different animals. I understand that trusts can be a good vehicle for farmland ownership, and the trust can be a member of an LLC, as I said. So a trust is typically, people have revocable trusts that can change, but oftentimes trusts are irrevocable. So it's more similar to a will where you're making a decision, and it's a lot less changeable and a lot less flexible. Where an LLC, your operating agreement can be amended as time goes on. You're going to have different members, so it's hopefully going to continue on and change over time, and be a way to operate a business, where a trust is more of a way to own a business, if that's clear.
Okay. Any other questions for Sarah? Great questions, everyone. Did have a question about the slides being available. So following this, the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube account, and everyone that registered today will receive the link to the page to find out, to see the slides, as well as re-listen to the recording. So yes, it will go out, and we'll have all that posted. I'm going to wait a little bit longer, see if there's any questions coming in. I'm going to stop recording at this point.